Karen Reed, cop killer or cop boyfriend? Well, this is episode number 2 in this series. And did you know that there was another person, yes, another person, other than Karen Reed, was arrested in this case? Well, you're going to hear about that and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crime Buster. It's what some people, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. Charlie Crime Buster, CharlieCrimeBuster.com, and PeacemakerNetwork.com are copyrights owned by Charlie Crime Buster. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to Charlie Crime Buster. We're glad to have you on the Charlie Crime train today as we begin to again look into the case of Karen Reed. And we're going to take you to the scene of the crime. We're going to show you things in the background of the case that makes it, a really whodunit case. But first, I want to take a moment to welcome all of those that are listening today. We always have new listeners every single week, and we are honored and humbled that you're listening to the podcast. Hey, we'd like to invite you to reach out with a shout out. Yeah, reach out with a shout out. You can reach me, CharlieCrimeBuster at gmail.com, CharlieCrimeBuster at gmail.com. You can just say hi. You can ask questions. You can make suggestions about other episodes. You can even lodge objections. As we say here at Charlie, it is a safe spot, CharlieCrimeBuster at gmail.com. And we'd love to invite you to become a part of the support group for Charlie Crime Buster, because Charlie Crime Buster supports those men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. We are talking about law enforcement and first responders, and we're also talking about the military. Those brave men and women who are willing to risk their lives to keep your life and my life safe. We like to honor them. This is a way you can honor them and support the program. You can become a badge, BADGE supporter for as little as $3 a month. Go on, check it out. PeacemakerNetwork.com. PeacemakerNetwork.com. Hey, if you'd like to get caught up on all of the series, we have a number of series of all kinds of good, true crime drama. We'd like to invite you to check out our website, CharlieCrimeBuster.com, CharlieCrimeBuster.com. Again, thank you for being a part of the Charlie train today. Oh, before we get into the real focus of the investigation today, I do want to invite you to check out our YouTube channel. We've just started that, by the way, but every week we try to take the time, James and I, to sit back and talk about the episode that we just dropped. In other words, this coming week, we're going to be talking about this episode. And as we talk about this episode, we will be adding some stuff to it that you did not hear in the initial podcast. So join us at YouTube. Just go to YouTube at CharlieCrimeBuster.com. You're going to find us there. All right, my folks, as I said, this is a really whodunit case. You know, you always know this when there are large groups of good people who are divided on the innocent and guilt of someone. Now, notice I said large groups of good people, because in any case, you're going to have some people taking sides on every single case. Hey, folks, gosh, there are people who still worship serial killers in this country. They really do. They want to marry them. They adore them. They worship them. So I'm not talking about those nutcases. But when you have a large group of good people on either side, you have a real mystery. In just a couple of days ago, on our YouTube channel that I mentioned earlier, I was asked by James on why we were covering this episode. And I explained to him, wow, why would we cover this episode? I mean, it's one of those episodes, one of those stories, rather, that at the very first, it looks cut and dry. We certainly know who did it. You know, boom, in this particular situation, people thought, well, she just ran over him with her car. She hit him with a car. That's why he laid there in the snow all night long. And it looked like a open and shut case. But then you begin to pull a thread, rather. And then it all unravels. Yep, all unravels, and you find it's not such a, open, shut case. There are other things involved. Not saying she did not do that. At this point, I'm not telling you she did not do that. But I am telling you there's a whole lot to look at in this case. And now, as your conductor on the Charlie train, I want to guide you in this investigation. And the best place is to always start with the timeline. You see, that's why investigators always try to construct a timeline right at the very beginning. The timeline can tell you important things about the case. It can allow you to consider who may or may not be suspects in the case. So we're going to start out on this particular episode with a little better timeline of what happened to the Boston cop, John O'Keefe, on that cold night when a snowstorm hit the Boston, Massachusetts area. It was shortly after midnight when Karen Reed, that was John's girlfriend, John O'Keefe and a group of his friends went to the Waterfall Bar and Grill in Canton. Now that was on the night of January the 28th, back in 2022. And according to those, particularly the prosecutors, they said that Reed consumed several alcoholic beverages. Matter of fact, as I said in last week's case, a whole lot of drinking was going on by all of those that were involved. And so Karen Reed, and we all agree on this, everybody agrees on this, she drove O'Keefe there to the home of Boston police officer Sergeant Brian Albert. In other words, there's going to be an after party after the drinking at the bars. And that is where police said people from the bar were all going to meet back up. Now, at 1 a.m., court documents now reveals that in the weeks before, and even the hours leading up to the night out, there were a lot of text messages between Reed and O'Keefe on the voicemail that showed, that everything wasn't going well in paradise for this relationship. In other words, they had some problems. Investigators said that around 1 a.m. on January 29th that Reed allegedly, she left O'Keefe a voicemail. And it said some pretty tough stuff. It said, you are a freaking loser. Not the real word freaking, though. Freak yourself, and John, I freaking hate you. And you can put the other word in there and the freaking if you like to get real color as it really was said. Then we go from 1 a.m. Now we know that shortly after midnight, they went to the grill, and then they went to, Sergeant's house, Brian Albert's house. So at 1 a.m., we know there were some text messages that went back and forth. So let's move now from 4 to 5 a.m. Now, let me back up just a moment to make sure you got this in the timeline. According to Karen Reed, she pulled up to the house. She let John out of the vehicle. She wasn't feeling well. She was going to go on home. And so she let him out, and according to her, she saw him walk up to the side of the house and saw him come to the door. That's according to her. So now she goes home, and between 4 and 5 a.m., actually around 4:23 a.m., and by the way now, heavy snow is falling, O'Keefe's niece, she called Jennifer McCabe, Brian Albert's sister-in-law and a friend of O'Keefe's. And she was saying that Reed contacted her and was distraught because O'Keefe had not come home. Now remember, he was taking care of his niece and nephew. And they called Reed, talked to her, and said she's upset because he had not come home. He was not even answering his cell phone. That's according to court documents. Now, McCabe said she heard Reed screaming, John didn't come home. We had a fight. Now, that was what McCabe said. All of this is hearsay. Remember, hearsay doesn't go a long way in court. So around 5 a.m., Reed called another woman whose husband was friends with O'Keefe. Now, prosecutors are saying that Reed said while they were searching, what if he's dead? What if a plow hit him? I don't remember anything from last night. We drank so much, I don't remember anything. So now we know that Reed, McCabe, and third woman, they all went to look for O'Keefe. They went back to the bars there where they were first started. I'm thinking maybe he went back to a bar. Then they actually went to his home. And while during that time now, prosecutors, these are the prosecutors, not the defense, prosecutors are saying that Reed mentioned to the women that she had a crack in her taillight. This is very important, this taillight. Hang on to that. And she wondered if she could have maybe hit O'Keefe. And at 5:07 a.m., there's a surveillance camera on O'Keefe's house. That's when they went back to try to see if he was there. And it showed that Reed's SUV came extremely close to O'Keefe's SUV in the driveway. Now, prosecutors, they come back and say, well, if that was when that taillight was cracked, there was no taillight pieces found in the driveway. Reed's defense argues, well, maybe it did strike the SUV, breaking the taillight, which would give an explanation for that damage to the SUV. Now, let me just kind of get into this timeline for a moment. You're probably well aware that the taillight being cracked is important for both the prosecution and the defense. All I got to say is hang on to your hats. This ride will get bumpy. And in investigations, it is very important not to make opinions till all the evidence is examined. So they're looking for him, and around 6 a.m., as they're looking, they return to Brian Albert's home, and Reed sees O'Keefe lying in the snow. Even the emergency responder that got there said she was hysterical. Now, Reed, according to others there, says, I hit him. The defense argues that one of the first responding officers from Canton Police actually gave false and deceptive testimony to the grand jury, the same grand jury that would later indict her. Now, Reed, in her own interview, one of the news interviews, she says that she did not say, I hit him, but rather she asked the question because she did not know what happened to John. She did not say, I hit him, but rather she asked, did I hit him? Did I hit him? So here you have two different stories. Some people said she said, I hit him. She said, no, I didn't. I said, did I hit him? Did I hit him? Again, hearsay, not a lot of evidence. On January the 29th, 2022, the prosecutors and the defense, they all agree that at some point in the morning, O'Keefe was killed. And they all agree that somebody on January the 29th, at some time in the morning, listen to this, Googled how long to die in the code. How long to die in the code. Now, this is a really important part of the case. We do know that the person who Googled it was not Karen Reed. She did not Google how long to die in the code, but was rather someone that was in that house that night at that party who Googled it. So they all agree that it was Googled. They all know it wasn't Karen Reed. They all know it actually was Jennifer McCabe. But the sides both disagree on when that search was made. Prosecutors they like to say, and they are saying, that it happened at 6:23 and 6:24 a.m. That was after O'Keefe's body was found. But the defense, they say they have a federal forensic expert that determined that search was actually made at 2:27 a.m. Wow, think about that now. This is huge. This was before police was alerted that O'Keefe's body had been found. And if it was at 2:27 a.m., it means someone in the house knew, Jennifer McCabe knew O'Keefe was dying in the snow on the front lawn of Albert's house. My friend, if it was 2:27 a.m., this would lend great credence to the fact that he got into a fight. Someone put him out of the house, left him there to die. And it wasn't that Karen Reed hit him with a car. If that text was at 2:27 a.m., it is huge in this case. Now remember, prosecution says, no, it didn't happen. Then it happened at 6:27 after they were already finding him. Defense says, no, we have a forensic expert who says it happened at 2:27, not 6:27. 623, like the prosecution said, rather. Prosecution said 623, 624. Defense says 227. So, there's one of the sticky issues in this case. So how did John O'Keefe die? On January the 29th, police said they found a broken cocktail glass and pieces of taillight at the scene. That's what they said. At the scene, they said they found it. Now, there's a whole lot more here, and we're going to get into it, but right now it's time to take a little break and do what we call our Crazy Crook story. You see, we tell a Crazy Crook story to kind of lighten the load of a lot of the dark things that we cover in the case. So now it's time for Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Now, folks, we all know that sometimes you hear these Crazy Crook stories and you say it's just too hard to believe it, you know. Even though you know it to be true, it's so wild that we struggle to believe it, right? And as often as not, unfortunately, it involves, again, sorry to my fellow Florida residents, but it involves a Florida man. And Florida man may have outdone himself yet again. That's right. When he tried to pick a fight with a woman at a stoplight. And my friend, I got to tell you, if your blood alcohol concentration is 0.22, you can get ready for some crazy things indeed. His name is Joseph H. Carl. He's a 48-year-old Florida man. He was driving his Dodge Ram 1500 in the rain on a Tuesday night. This is according to the Gainesville Sun. And about 7 p.m., well, he ran into another vehicle, and that vehicle was waiting at the stoplight. Now, most people would say, well, maybe I ought to get out and say, hey, man, I'm sorry. Let me get your insurance information, and we'll deal with this another time when it's not so rainy. But no, that's not what Joseph Carl did. According to early reports, he jumped out. He began yelling at the driver. In fact, he came across so strong, well, the woman in the other car got scared. She drove away. And that's, my friend, when Carl's Ram, that big truck, began rolling into the intersection. And Carl, the crazy crook, he forgot that he did not put it in park. He had forgotten to put it in park. Now, you would think that most people say, well, hey, this is a rolling big truck. Maybe I better get away and protect myself. No, not what this crazy crook did. He threw himself in front of the truck trying to stop it. Now, my friend, even the curb weight, they say, of a two-door model is over 4,500 pounds. And whatever Carl tells everybody about how strong he was, well, he wasn't strong enough to push that back up the hill. In fact, his truck ran right over him. That's right, ran right over him. Now, when police and paramedics got to the scene, Carl still wasn't really taking it very easy. He was stumbling around the intersection. They said he smelled like alcohol. Again, maybe this would be a good time to say, hey, folks, I'm sorry. Let me just deal with this. This is what happened. Nope. He said he does not drink and drive. That's what he told the cops. And then later he kind of changed that. Well, I'm returning from a neighboring town. Maybe I had 3 beers. Always 1, 2, 3, you know. Well, it must be big beers, I used to say to people out there on the street. Well, of course, he failed the sobriety test. Also refused the breathalyzer test. But when the police were looking at his truck, they're inventorying it, under the suspicion of drunk driving, well, they found it was full of empty beer cans and had a cold 16-ounce Miller High still in the cup holder. Well, now, Carl knows he's done for. And now he's saying his foot hurt. Yep, his foot hurt. After all, he got run over by his own truck, right? So police took him to the hospital, and my friend, when you go to the hospital, they're going to test your blood. And even though he failed to allow them to give him the breathalyzer, well, the test was done at the hospital. 0.22. 0.22. Triple the 0.08 legal limit. And Carl, of course, was then arrested for DUI and DUI with property damage. So, my friend, this crazy crook who attempted road rage as a drunk and ends up being run over by his own truck and then arrested for DUI for running himself over? Well, he is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. So now back to our main focus. Again, we're in the timeline. Now it's January the 29th. And police say they found a broken cocktail glass and pieces of tail light there at the scene. Now, in the trial, we're going to find that the Canton police were the first responders. But then the Maryland State Police took the investigation, and then the lead investigator was the trooper Michael Proctor. Remember that name, because it gets even messier, if possible. Because we now know that Michael Proctor, that lead investigator, he's been suspended without pay, and he himself is being investigated. So you can see where it's very easy to jump to conclusions that maybe there was a police cover-up in this case. But was there? Was there? A lot going on here. As I said last week, these people love to drink, and the only person who was tested about their own alcohol, BAC, was Karen Reed. Now, according to police, they did not have probable cause to test anybody else. But the question is, did they even look for probable cause to test anyone else at this time? We know they did not go into the house. They did not call the house a crime scene. They only kept the crime scene out there in the yard. And a forensic toxicologist estimated that Reed's blood alcohol content, would have been around 0.13 to 29 around 12:45 a.m., which was more than the legal limit. So we know that Karen Reed was intoxicated as far as how much you should have to drive. Now, she said in her interview that she had had some drinks, she had a buzz, but she felt she was safe to drive. Sure. January 31st, 2022, there was an autopsy. Prosecutor said the medical examiner ruled that the cause of death was blunt impact and that there were injuries to the head and hypothermia. Remember, he was laying out there in that blizzard. Now, they went on to say that the medical examiner did not, quote, find any obvious signs of an altercation or a fight. Now, keep in mind, this is stated by the same department, the same group, that used red Solo cups to put evidence in. A shopping bag from a grocery store to store evidence. In other words, my friend, the way they did this investigation would not make the script of a CSI episode. That's right. Wouldn't quite make it. In fact, some people have said that it was sloppy police work. Others have alleged that combined with a elaborate cover-up involving several people, including law enforcement officials. So you can see we've got a real whodunit going on right now. Now, let me say one thing that I think is worth mentioning at this point. Karen Reed, of course, at this point, we know that she was arrested. And we know that on February the 2nd, actually, she was arrested. And she appeared in the district court for the first time, pleading guilty to manslaughter, motor vehicle homicide, and leaving the scene of a motor vehicle collision causing death. On June the 10th, go ahead a few months, a grand jury indicts her on second-degree murder, manslaughter while operating under the influence of alcohol, and leaving the scene of a personal injury and death. And she was arraigned with new charges. She pleaded no guilty, Norfolk Superior Court. Ordered held on a $100,000 bail. She made bail. She's been released since that time. Now, here's the next part of it. Karen Reed contacts Alan Jackson in California. Alan Jackson is a well-known prosecutor who's now turned defense lawyer. And she also gets a hold of a guy by the name of David Yannetti, who also comes with Alan Jackson. Now, Alan Jackson, on his interview, said these words. He said he didn't know anything about the case. He got this email from Karen Reed, said cop killer, and that got his attention, and then he looked at the autopsy photos. And this is what he said himself. Alan Jackson, well-known attorney, well-respected prosecutor. He said, when I saw those autopsy photos, I knew there was no way that was done by Karen Reed backing into him. That was the hook that got him involved in the case. And so he and Alan Jackson and David Yannetti are now launching a defense. And they claim that O'Keefe was involved in a fight inside Brian Albert's home. They said he was beaten. His body was later dumped outside. And both the attorneys focused on wounds to O'Keefe's arms, which said it also showed that he was probably attacked by Albert's dog during the fight. Now, Jackson went on to say this is not just fishing. He said that in the May 3rd hearing. We've got a fish on the hook. We just need the court to help reel it in. Quote, we've got a fish on the hook. We just need the court to help rule it in. But here comes Norfolk Assistant District Attorney Adam Lally. He says O'Keefe never went into the home. He said there is no zip evidence that Mr. O'Keefe was beaten and left for dead. Now, in May the 24th of 2023, pretrial hearing, Reed's attorneys, they lay out what they allege to be a cover-up by law enforcement. They say the Massachusetts State Police is involved. There are people that were in the house that are involved. Brian Albert is involved. Jennifer McCabe is involved. And the rest of the folks in that house, there was some level of involvement by every one of them. Every single one of them. We're not going to rest till we get the bottom of who's behind this cover-up. He went on to say not only does Karen Reed deserve this, John O'Keefe deserves this. And has deserved it from moment one. Said that's why, quote unquote, we're not going to rest. After that dramatic hearing, Reed, she also spoke to reporters. She said, we know who did it, we know, and we know who spearheaded this cover-up, you all know. Reed said on the courthouse steps, I tried to save his life. I tried to save his life at 6 a.m. I was covered with his blood. I was the only one trying to save his life. And so now we get to a battle over evidence. And just when we thought that this case could not get any crazier, on October the 11th, 23, Adian Kearney, a blogger who operates the site Turtle Boy News, he was arrested on charges of intimidation, all related to Karen Reed case. You see, Turtle Boy had been covering the case for months, often recording himself confronting witnesses. His defense attorney, they told the judge, he wasn't doing anything but exercising his First Amendment right. And we do know that then a judge actually revoked Turtle Boy's bail. This was because there was a new charge, assault and battery charge. It seems that Turtle Boy allegedly went to his ex-girlfriend's home, demanding to see her phone, and shoved her during a confrontation. And as a result of that, Turtle Boy, he was in jail for nearly 2 months. Later, they released him. Now, that's a question in and of itself. Here is a guy who is a blogger, has all kinds of shows on YouTube, and he says he's doing nothing more than any other journalist would do, and that is ask questions. Ask questions even of the witnesses. They do not have to talk to him. But, according to the prosecution, he's intimidating them. Hard to believe you could intimidate. That a little reporter like him could intimidate police officers who are already armed. I think there's a little bit of push there. I don't know that these police officers are intimidated, but I'm sure they're frustrated with this guy saying the things that he's saying. And yet, it's all protected, according to his attorneys, under the freedom of speech that we have in this country. So that trial is going to be really, really important as well, and we'll keep you up to date on that. By the way, if you'd like to hear more about this particular episode, then be sure and join us on our YouTube channel. This week, James and I will be on the crime train again, and this time it'll be Charlie's Crime Talk at YouTube. Just go to YouTube at Charlie Crimebuster, and you can become a part of that part of the coverage. We always talk about the episodes. We'll be talking about this, bringing some things into it that you did not hear on this particular episode. Also, we want to encourage you, if you'd like to support the program, go to peacemakernetwork.com. Let me also urge you to join us with other Charlie Crimebuster shows by going to charliecrimebuster.com. So, my friend, here we are. Was there a cover-up? Was there a fight in the house? Or is this just a simple case that she actually backed into him, whether she knew it or she didn't? After all, there were pieces of taillight found near the victim. How did that happen? What will the defense say about that? And believe it or not, they have an answer to that as well. We're going to be sharing all that with you as we get into the court hearing next week on episode number 3. Until this time next time, though, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, be safe, be alert, for the life you save, it may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com, or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.